Oh.
All right, back to where we were. Stand by. My cat has just arrived.
Oh, what's your cat's name?
Well, the people who've claimed him call him Oscar.
Oscar.
Let's see him. Pick him up.
Okay,
Kitty. Oh, Oscar, such a beautiful kitty.
Well, hold on.
Oh, Oscar. Oh,
look at
Oscar.
that. Oh,
You're
he's
a wonderful kitty. Oh, he's a black and white.
Yeah.
They're the best.
Yeah, he looks like a Sylvester, you know?
Oh.
He's got spats. All right. All right, let's get back into this because we've got much to do here. Your food's in the other room, by the way. Okay. All right. All right. So anyway, this is a really nice approach. Nice angle. Good. You're influenced by Monet, I heard you say. That's awesome. Good. All right.
Yeah.
What is the size of this?
12 by 12.
12 by 12. Okay. It's good size. Nice square format. Square formats are not that easy to do. So, and I'm glad you experienced it. You offset it. I'll just say one thing about it. The three notes down here.
Yeah.
Okay. They're demanding a little bit of attention.
Yeah.
Too much. So I would look to maybe the front one might be okay. So I'm going to tone down the one in the back here a little bit. I'm just going to go glaze over it just a little bit there. And then the one that's above the green leaf, I'm going to glaze over that. And then I'm going to just slightly glaze over the front one. Okay, when I knock them down in value, now the eye goes to the flowers themselves in the vein.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I had a question for you.
Yeah.
I really liked the composition, and all of a sudden I realized that orange flower is smack in the middle of the canvas.
That's okay. You just make something more sexy outside of that. So
Okay.
I'm going to go up here.
And also too the rhythm, Nicola, of the travel of the leaves in the lower left up to the red and then the darker notes, it off balances the orange. It helps to balance that, I think. I don't know what Thomas thinks.
I'm sorry, I just got distracted by the cat. I'm just sorry. He's trying to get on the table. What did you say? What did you say?
I said that although the orange flower is there in the middle,
yeah,
the line of the petals in my lower left up to the red and then the two darker in the right, it causes it to travel and it actually balances that. So I think and then also too the bright sprays of the lighter value whitish creamer colors also offsets that.
Okay.
So you make it work really beautifully. Congratulations. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going into the pinks a little bit, make them a little more seductive. And then I'm going to tone down just a little bit of the orange up in the top right sprig right there. That's kind of this angle that's going up and to the right. I'm just going to kind of add a little bit of background note to knock them down just a tad, just a little bit. So now the other ones that are within the painting, obviously this one is becoming more important.
Okay.
Okay. So it's just an adjustment game. Okay. It's an adjustment game and you could do big things with it. Okay. Bring the orange down maybe here. What I just did was this orange flower in the middle kind of, just bring it down so it overlaps a little bit, make it a little more important. All right, you're causing trouble now, Kitty. Yeah, so I'm just, it's a push-pull thing. It's like if something's demanding too much attention, or you find it's right in the middle, see if you can get away with that by making something else, pulling our attention away from it. And if that becomes too much, maybe you can alter something else nearby to make that a little more. Okay, so it's a kind of a jigsaw puzzle, but anyway, it's beautiful, nice colors.
Thanks.
Nice colors. I hope you do more of these. Do more still lifes. And then look up Odilon Redon, Redon. Okay.
Okay.
And then you'll see some of his work today if we can get to it. As far as still life patterns here.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much, Thomas.
Yeah, you're welcome. Diana, are you here? Hello, Diana. Hi. How are you? No? Yes? No? Boy, I would have loved to have talked about this one. Cool. All right, well, Diana's not here. She's sending in her homework. I think, okay, if there's anybody that did not see their work here today, and you know you sent it in, resend it, and we'll hit it at the end of the class, okay? Okay. All right, and we're gonna get rid of that. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? I've got a scab that just started to bleed, and I need to control that. And then we'll come back and we'll get started into the last class, okay? So let's do it. 5-minute break. Thank you very much. And I'll deal with the cat. Thank you. Okay. So I want you to watch. We're going to watch about 5 minutes of this here. So like a 22-minute video, but we only have enough time for 5. So let's watch it.
Developing a composition for a painting is one of the most important steps in the painting process. It's one of those elements that can make or break your painting. It's critical, and in order to develop an eye for composition design, you need to make sure you understand some of the important concepts that relate to landscape, such as what makes landscape painting unique, how to view the scene in terms of planes, how a composition leads your eye, design do's and don'ts, and methods used by some of the great masters. This video touches on all of these topics and then concludes with a helpful review. But let's go back to the beginning and lay the foundation. There are some broad concepts that need to be discussed before we can delve into the details of composition. The first concept deals with how landscape differs from other subject matter, such as still life or portraiture. There are things that the landscape painter has to consider or work with that artists working in other subjects don't really have to worry about. I'm specifically talking about atmosphere, weather, sunlight, and land features. These are all things that are unique to landscape. Let's take a brief look at each one. Atmosphere is basically the sky, the air. It's that almost invisible layer that sits between the ground and outer space. It's invisible at a close range, but the atmosphere greatly affects the visual world around you when seen at a distance or under certain atmospheric conditions. There are actually tiny little particles of matter that make up the atmosphere, and that causes, when seen in mass, distant objects and features to become increasingly hazy and increasingly cool in tone the farther they get from you. So the farther they are from you, the more particles of atmosphere sit between you and the object. And this is a factor that has to be taken into consideration as a landscape painter. Weather is another condition that other subjects don't really have to deal with. Weather conditions can really affect the mood of the day. Whether you have a sunny or a rainy or a foggy day, each one carries a different emotional feeling. Sunlight is another thing you have to think about, and it's obviously related to weather and atmosphere in that each one affects the light and how it's filtered. Atmosphere and weather both affect the strength or the intensity of the light and shadows. If it's foggy, your shadows are going to be less dramatic. And if it's very sunny, value contrast will be increased. Sunlight also has a color temperature. Morning light tends to be a cool light, and afternoon light warm. And finally, landforms or land features. That's something that really most other subjects don't worry about. And by this I mean your mountains, your trees, your rocks, even your water. The other overarching landscape topic that I wanted to touch on comes from a book by John F. Carlson that was put out in 1973 called Carlson's Guide to Landscape
It's
Painting.
a great book.
It's very popular even today. And in it, he theorizes that the landscape or nature can be broken down into a series of planes. This is very helpful, and I want to review it with you. However, I also want you to keep in mind that it's a theory, not a perfect science. There are many exceptions, and I'll show you a few. But what I like about it is the fact that it trains your brain to think of what you see in nature as physical planes. You'll see what I mean as we move along. Now, Carlson's theory deals with 4 planes. You have the light source, which is the sky, and you have the slanting features, which would be the mountains. You have your upright features, for example, trees, and then you have your flat plane, which would be the ground. Carlson's theory is based on the fact that, according to him, objects receive different amounts of light according to their plane. So a slanting mountain will not catch quite as much light as the ground, which is horizontal to the sky. And perpendicular objects receive even less light, so they end up as your darkest value. Now, why is all of this useful to you? I would say basically, it just helps you simplify your scene. It helps you take the landscape in front of you and break it down into workable groupings, or in this case, planes. It's a concept that's good to store in the back of your mind, and over time will subtly help you be more effective in deciphering what you see in nature. Now, as we mentioned before, there are a lot of exceptions to this. For example, as we see here, we have the leafless trees, the aspens, and they glow. They are almost the lightest value. And in this scene, the direction of the sunlight is causing the mountain on the right to be in deeper shade. So you have 2 mountains conveying 2 different values. And notice that snow is an exception as well, because it's so very white. And lastly, sometimes when the sun is setting, it will shine upon a mountainside, and that value will become one of the lighter values in the scene. So be aware of this whole theory, and it may be useful to you, but know that there are plenty of exceptions. Now, I've taken Carlson's theory and applied different verbiage to it just to make it a little more palatable to the landscape painter of today. Let's take a look. First, you have the distant background. These are the very distant mountains, and they tend to be darker than the sky, but one of the lighter values in the scene. Next, you have the background, which would be the closer mountains. These would be the slanted plains, and they are probably the next darkest value. We have the foreground, which is the plane that's horizontal to the sky and reflects more of the light. Therefore, it is a lighter value, maybe just a little darker than the very distant mountains. You also have the perpendicular objects, which are clearly some of the darkest values in the scene. And then the sky, which is obviously the lightest value that you have, although there are exceptions. Take a look at it in black and white. You can really see the value differences when you take away the color. Now that we've discussed some of the broader concepts, let's delve into the subject of composition design. And it all starts with determining how a composition leads the eye. When examining a scene, you need to determine a focal point and then figure out how the lines in the picture lead your eye. You may choose an object as your focal point, or you may just pick part of the scene, such as the end of a path or a road. Or sometimes you're just going for an overall mood or feeling. In the scene you see here, I wanted to focus on the graceful lines that you see in the branches. Now, one of the things that attracted me to this particular shot was the nice triangular shape that guided my eye to my chosen focal point. Now, I usually make these judgments when I see the images on my computer. When you see the photos, you should pay attention to how your eye moves through the scene. And that will tell you whether it's going to lead the viewer where you want to lead them, which is, again, to the focal point. Let's look at another example. Here you have a road that leads towards the sunlit area, and part of the mountains lead there too. You're basically following the natural lines of the scene to see where they lead the eye. So that's how you examine the scenes when you're looking for reference material or composition material. Now that we've briefly discussed land features and the importance of how elements lead your eye, let's talk about some do's and don'ts, and then we'll discuss some common design tools. But first, I want you to keep in mind that these are just meant to be helpful guides. These aren't meant to box you into rules. Many, if not most times, your composition will be the result of gut reaction. But training your eye for common errors and workable formats will help you make future decisions and help you evaluate problematic compositions. So let's take a look at two common don'ts. The first don't is don't split your painting in half. Now, just so that you know these rules are not set in stone, look at this piece by Paul Cézanne. Cézanne splits his canvas in half with this tree. Is it pleasing? Well, it's not something I would have done, but I'm not going to argue with Cézanne. Just keep in mind that for every rule, there's probably a painting out there that successfully breaks it. Another common rule is don't place your focal point at exactly the center of your painting. It happens that Renoir has broken that rule and successfully gets away with it. As you can see, if you place crosshairs dividing up the painting and then you circle the center, you find that he put his figure right in the middle, and he makes it work. Now, here are two helpful do's that you might want to keep in mind. The first one is try to use an odd number of elements. especially if your elements are going to be very obvious.
We've seen this.
The second one is remember to vary the sizes and the space between the elements. Think unity with diversity. In the painting we're looking at, Corot does a fantastic job varying his elements and still maintaining unity. Now we're going to discuss some of the tools that are commonly used in composition design. And we'll use works from some of the great masters as examples. The first one we're going to talk about is the rule of thirds. This is a very popular design format, and it involves dividing up your canvas or your paper into.
All right, so I've shown you this much. I'm going to give you the links so you can watch the whole thing on your own. You can see a lot of the rules that we've explored earlier are coming up in this, from the the odd number elements to the do's and don'ts and things like that. So at the risk of being redundant in the lesson plan, I will just pass on this now. Okay? Anybody have any questions around that? Yes, no? Okay. All right, can everybody see my desktop?
Yes.
All right, so this is a painting by Andre Durain that Larry Vigon sent to me yesterday. So he sends me things, I send him things, interesting things. Aside from the content, Andre Durain, who was known as more of one of the Fauvist painters and expressionist painters from the 19th into the 20th century, there was this world going on. What was really exciting to the public? Was it going to be avant-gardism that's going to shock them and make them, feel alive? Or is it going to be the traditional representational, predictable type of painting that has been going on for a couple of centuries prior to that? So these artists were bridging the gap here. So Durain does this one painting, and here's one of the rules that we did not mention before, especially when it comes to landscape painting, is try not to have more than 2 focal points. So if you notice here, he's kind of split the painting down in 2, okay? And he leaves the viewer's eye over here, which almost looks like an eye. But then again, there's a way to go down this way as well. So, it's up to you to decide whether or not to go in one direction or the other. But it does kind of get us to move around in it. So I started to look at the stylization and symmetry and the modernism that was going on. I think he painted this in 1911. And so I did an armature over it. This is a generic armature, just to see how his shapes lined up in the format where he designed things so they would come into alignment. The points and lines of coincidence, etc. You can see how the tree kind of lines up with this one here, or where this over here, the tree comes into contact with this rule of third, for instance. So that was the generic armature. Then I did one that was basically, let me go on to the next one here. Then I did another armature. Oh gosh, what's it called? Not the generic, but the golden section. Okay, where I had a square and divided the circle, basically arced it down and drew lines from there. And you can see how this aligns more with the golden section and what's going on in his drawing, etc., where he puts his lines and his points of interest, etc. So it was kind of fun to do. I mean, if you look at I could have kept going. Every time you see an intersection or an eye, you could draw another line. So the top of this, for instance, would now line up with this one here and this one here, etc. So there's something solid about this work of art, this masterwork here. So again, you could do more than one armature in any one of these paintings to see basically, they may or may not have been aware of it, but sure looks like they did have that, that understanding. Okay. All right. Now, to break this up, same time period, you had the traditional representational painters, and you had the sculptors from the 18th into the 19th into the 20th century, like Claude Monet. I love the fact that we can now colorize our photos. Of course, this is in Monet's studio. He's got a black armband. I guess his wife had just passed away, so he was in mourning when they took this picture. But it gives you an idea when you look at the colors, what he may have looked like in color. But I wanted to show this to you. Some of you have seen it before, but it's always good I love to see it because it brings these artists to life. So if you haven't seen it yet, it makes what they did more real. He has such bad arthritis that they had to wrap his brush in his hands. And if you haven't seen it, there's a movie called Renoir about him at this stage of his life. Pretty phenomenal, beautiful cinematography. He was like 89 years old when he said to his wife, I think I finally understand something about painting. And he went to sleep and he didn't wake up in the morning. So even at 89 years old, he didn't understand everything.
So he wasn't bored.
Never bored. To see the
You know-
movie Renoir, and he had a lot of help. He had a whole group of women that his wife included that lived with them, that were his assistants, his models, and yeah, they helped him get along.
It's kind of great that he was still learning and enjoy and and feeling like he was learning and growing
Yeah.
right to the end.
One thing I noticed is that in his process, or at least at this phase of living, that there's like a couple strokes, and then he sits back and
Yeah.
relax and drinks it in, and then he's not in such a rush.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of listening involved.
Yeah, listening to himself, right?
Yeah, listening, inner
And
voice.
singing.
I always love watching this. This is Rodin, of course,
Come in.
working with no safety goggles.
Is he working in plaster at this point?
I don't know if it's plaster or alabaster. I don't know. But you'll see he's got chips all over himself. So as he chips away, it's spraying back in his face. Looks like it's alabaster. Well, it's hard to say. Any lip readers in the room?
Who speak French?
Yeah, who speak French? It's right.
He looks much fitter than the other two to me. I mean, when he was walking.
Physical. You know what? That's a good point.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, Monet loved to eat. And Renoir, obviously he was quite elderly at that time. They all smoked and drank. But Rodin, I mean, there's so much physical exercise going into this. The only known video footage of Degas. Video footage. I mean, film footage.
I'm clearly going to have to grow a beard.
I think you've earned the right. Okay.
You're going to send the link to that one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that one will be on the video. Okay.
Fabulous. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Isn't that great? I just love watching that. Never get
Yeah,
tired of it. It brings it to life. They were real people. Okay. Okay, this is a link as well. This is what people do when they're bored or they have COVID. Okay, they do their best to make or whatever, imitate masterworks. and they send them in. He's got an apple. This one's a little funny. This is what you do in an Animal House. Somebody, I don't know about this. This is just a remake of it. Somebody constructed a room to make a bed. And I've seen a number of interpretations of this.
Or a dollhouse.
Yeah. Oh, I have one from the other day. I opened a
Oh, that's good.
yeah, I had a pancake in the oven the other day that looked like that. That's
These
a
are really fun.
great Halloween costume, huh? Yeah, it's just fun. You put yourself in the picture. This one I'm not quite sure about. I don't know where they
That's
come
so
up with those
funny.
ideas, but art imitates life. David Caspar or Caspar David Friedrichs.
Life imitating art, imitating life.
That's correct. That's a nice one. This is a stretch. And of course, if anybody's seen The Girl with the Pearl Earring, that's a good movie. That was fun to watch. Also, Tim's Vermeer. If anybody has not seen it, look up Tim's Vermeer and watch that movie.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. And that's a stretch too.
Oh my.
This is what art students do for their master's projects, you see. I've never seen this one here.
The wrong color cat.
Yeah. It's a ferret. Oh my goodness.
My.
Otto Dix. There's Magritte. Okay. All right. That's to keep you from getting bored.
So great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Inspiring.
All right. Now moving on. Okay. So at the time of the Impressionists and the Expressionists and the Futurists and the Surrealists, you had this break. You had these artists like Sir Arthur Streeton that were doing their best to maintain the abstraction in their landscapes. You know, it's almost like an underpainting, and they're stopping when they get just enough said, and then they walk away from it, and it's just perfect. There's a liveliness to it. So while I can appreciate photorealism, I love artwork like this that leaves more to my imagination, and I can finish it myself if I want. There are just mainly color notes coming together to suggest shapes, not to define them. Okay. Now, I'm not going to show this to you because we're not going to have enough time, but this will be one of the things I want you to watch. It's called The Rules of Abstraction. Really nice to look at. Okay. All right. Also around that time, here in America, here in California, we had the Spanish flu, Prohibition. After we won the war, or helped to win the war in World War I, vets came home damaged mentally, emotionally. They didn't have anything like the VA or anything to help them get back into life and become normal citizens again. Anyways, right at that same time, you had the Santa Barbara School of the Arts here, and one of their manifestos, I guess you could say, was that about art. And art is to heal and to unify. And you had some of these instructors come back and teach at the School of the Arts. And they made the art and what they did available to the common citizen. If you couldn't afford it, there were scholarships available. And this is an example of the first bronze casting class right here in Santa Barbara. They did stone plaster casting. This guy, I cannot remember his name. He was the instructor. He was in the trenches with the Scottish regiment in World War I. Obviously, he's donning a scar on his forehead. If I had his name, I'd give it to you because he did some amazing design, decorative sculptures on buildings in Scotland, in Edinburgh, where they had a big art school there. And Ferdinand Lundgren actually hired him to come over and teach this class. So you had Donald Horde here, you had Jody Young here, and who's the other guy right here? You had Elizabeth Mason here, who started the Historical Museum in, or the first curator anyway for that. And you had, actually this is George Stanley, right? This is the guy that created the first Oscar here. This is Donald Horde here. And they have his sculptures down in San Diego, as well as in LA, okay? So, but what I wanted to point out is that the whole concept of art at that time, you had the National Academy of Design in New York, and these are all, I listed all these design artists who visited or exhibited and or taught in Santa Barbara. So you heard her just mention John F. Carlson. These guys all came through, the ones that are in red are the ones that taught here. But all of them came through Santa Barbara at one time. And the list is long. These are all National Academy artists. So when the School of the Arts started up, you had these artists living here or visiting or running through or teaching at the School of the Arts. And it was basically free. And they all showed their artwork as well at the Faulkner Gallery. So these guys were doing mostly all traditional representational painting. Okay, it was very safe. Okay, whereas back in Europe, you had guys like Picasso here doing things like Dada and playing with design like this here. So this is a Cubist head that he's known for. And I got a little story I want to share about this. I'm going to annotate it while I'm telling the story. The thing about the armatures and the points of coincidences and the way he looked at this, you can see these lines of coincidences that are happening along the way. And they go in both directions. But as he was creating this, you could tell that he was lining things up to make sure that they all kind of fell in alignment with each other, no pun intended, going in both directions diagonally.
But this is three-dimensional.
That's correct. That's right.
So,
Three-dimensional as well.
but what I'm trying to say is the fact that they line up in a photograph from one angle
Yes.
doesn't, I mean, we see them lined up, but,
Yes.
but
If
what
you were
makes
to turn
you
this, if you were to
think
turn it 45 degrees
yeah,
or 15 degrees and put it on a, what do you call it? A lazy Susan?
yeah,
What do you call it?
yeah, lazy
You would
Susan.
see them happening from other angles as well. I'm just taking this one because
Yeah.
the story I wanted to tell you was I was probably 1996. I had gone down to LACMA and I was in this room where this sculpture was sitting. It was with a bunch of bronzes as well, but this one was there. And it was about 7 o'clock at night. The museum was going to close in about 30 minutes. And I had studied this in my master's program. Yeah, so it was about 99. And there was a guard standing there in the room, and he could see I was taking an interest in this one, and I was looking at it from all different angles. And he kind of, mentioned, he says, if you like more sculptures like this, there's another room in the next building you can go and see more of Picasso's sculptures. And I go, thank you, this is really amazing. He says, yeah, it's really beautiful. And there was no one else in the building, and I said, can I touch it? And he looked both ways he said, oh no, you can't do that. But then he looked over his shoulder again, and he says, yeah, go ahead. So he let me put my hands all over the sculpture just to feel it, you know, because I think sculptures really need to be felt, in my opinion. So, all right. Back to Picasso, and let's see what's going on. Oh, I got to clear this. Hold on a second. All right. All right. Here we go. So this is something that, again, is to watch the master's work, learning through observation here. I'm going to fast forward it a little bit here. Well, maybe not. So I'm going to bring it up to the beginning, just to watch him work. There we go.
De mon côté, s'il arrive quoi que ce soit, je coupe, parce qu'il n'y a très peu de pellicule. Bon, numéro 1. Vous êtes prêts? Attention, tu es prêt? Oui. Moteur. D'accord.
So he's paying attention to his line work and the shapes surrounding his line. All within the format.
It looks like the kind of designs he made for ceramics.
Yes. All right, so that's his métier. It's easy to look at a painting or a sculpture and be able to tell that's a Picasso. He had a stylization.
I'm not noticing any armatures though.
Nope. He didn't need them.
Dès que le noir est fini. Hein. Oui.
I think he intended to make a chicken from the beginning, or did that just sort of evolve?
With him, everything evolves. Remember the dream that I shared with you that I had?
Yep.
Where I just made a landscape and he changed it into a horse.
Uh-huh.
Everything evolves.
He started with kind of still life, and then he made that into a fish and then into a chicken.
Yes.
Have you ever worked from dream images? The other night I had a dream of the most profoundly beautiful paintings that were mostly in subdued tones of, you know, black and grays and muted, and it just took my breath away in the dream, and I'd love to recreate it. I have no idea.
Do it. Do it. You know, that's why you have a dream journal.
Yeah, I wrote it down and made sketches.
So I can't tell if this is in completely in black and white or if he adds color. We're not going to watch the whole film, but this will be sent to you. Now watch what he does.
It looks like he's like he must be drawing on glass or something, because this is from the back, and then the other picture is from the front.
Yes. Yeah, so we're getting to see a reverse of what he's doing here.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an absorbent paper
Tu as déjà une
that's
demi-minute de
placed
passé.
on glass. Now it's
Or-
turning color. See the color?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Il y a plus de 45 secondes. Oui, bien sûr, on a le temps. Encore un petit peu, hein? Oui, mais dépêche-toi, j'ai un peu triché. Quoi? J'ai un peu triché pour te laisser du temps.
There's a level of freedom here that I think is the most important quality to strive for in art.
It's a lot of humor, too.
Yes. Remember what Larry had mentioned last week? What Picasso's quote, it took him 4 years to learn to paint like Rubens or Raphael, and a lifetime to learn to paint like a child.
Nice, nice quote.
Why notism?
Il me dira quand il sera prêt.
I think he changes it one more time here. He's putting a little bit of
Prêt.
wine in it or something. He's not afraid to ruin it.
I think it just turned from a human to a puppy.
They're running out of film.
Attends, je coupe, arrête-toi. Symétrix. Symétrix. Tourne.
Oh, look at that. Interesting, huh? It looks like the chicken's looks like a face up here on the top right.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right. All right. I'm gonna get out of this.
He's really willing to go over the edge. Like he has something that's workable, but then he goes even deeper and it becomes something entirely different. Layers.
Yes. Yes. Okay, you said something about armatures. You didn't see any armatures. I don't know how many of you have visited Guernica or seen Guernica in Madrid. It's a phenomenal painting, and there's a lot of depth to this. And again, I've got so much I want to share, but I can't share everything today. This is an example of a Route 5 rectangle that he used. Okay, and I'm going to show you here. This is Route 5 rectangle, exactly the same way that he did this mural here. And I'm going to click on this. All right, this is the Barnstone Studios again, where they had deconstructed that painting. This is a photograph that shows Picasso working on the painting in a cramped studio. Okay, and you can start to see when you draw these armatures over it, how things line up.
Thomas,
Yes.
I just want to remind people that Route 5 is very closely related to the Golden Mean.
Very close. This is more like the golden mean here, and then you got to give it an extra. But if you were to divide it into 2 more lines in here, you'd have 5 equal spaces, etc. Okay, but you got the same principles here with the Baroque and the Sinister. Okay, then a 90-degree reciprocal here, coming down and drawing it up. Okay, drawing a diagonal to that, bringing it down. It's going to give you your next line. Bring it up, etc. Here you go, right here. So there's the Route 5. Here it is with
Those are fifths. Why are we saying Route 5?
That's what it's called. Square root of 5.
Yeah, but it isn't the square root of 5. It's a fifth.
So you want to call it root 5th?
You have to watch the Barnstone lectures on geometry, Georgia.
Okay. All right. I'm just saying, it's like,
Yeah, I
it's
know.
like it's like it's over mathematized. I don't know. I think, I sometimes think critics like to make things fancier than they are.
Yeah, I don't think these are critics that are doing this, though. I think these are designers and artists that are doing it.
Okay.
You know, the critics don't know their left hand from their right hand. So, in my opinion, in fact, you know, the saying, those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't do or teach often criticize. So,
Or lecture.
oh, that's, well, I don't know about that. Anyways, this is just a way of mathematically dividing the space to see where his genius lies. Okay, so we're just looking for the alignments of his shapes. Okay, the points and lines and where they come into alignment with each other. Okay, here's another way of looking at it where things line up. So this is what I want you to be doing when you're creating your artwork. Okay, you're looking for the symmetry, you're looking for where the shapes align within your landscapes or your still lifes. You're comparing them, you're seeing the picture as a whole. Okay, now we're not going to watch this because this is an in-depth video, which is also one that I will send to you. And you can watch on your own, okay, at your own time, and it talks about that painting. Okay, now along comes. All right, so I want some honest feedback. I'm going to show you 2 short videos here, but I want some honest feedback on it because this is a 21st century interpretation of Guernica, and I want to know how you feel about it. So what do you think about that?
I found it distracting.
Distracting.
I thought it was pretty cool. I liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was cool too. And it
Well,
sort of
I thought it was
goes through with what was
interesting.
happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just so I guess that the poetry of it was designed for sort of like still images. I think if it was animated, I would have liked to have seen the figures 3D and would have liked to see them 360 and would have liked to seen them move through space rather than just puppets.
Okay. Well, hold on a second. Since you brought it up. Okay.
And not a fan of that one.
Not a fan.
A couple reasons.
I thought the music and the photography brought it to life.
Okay.
I thought the first one trivialized the subject.
Okay.
This made it more grotesque.
More grotesque. Okay.
You know, really.
I agree with that.
No, I think Picasso would have loved that, and he would be into CGI if he was alive today because he was a sculptor. So all of a sudden, this is a 3D rendering of this incredibly painful, you know, piece he did. I thought it was very moving.
I have to say, I mean, given the subject matter, I think it really does it is grotesque because the subject matter is grotesque.
Yeah, it accentuated the mural.
Mhm.
Well,
I felt it was useful in dropping down deeper into the sort of emotional content and the reality of what that was like, and that was what that was inspired by, which in general I think is what is one of the beautiful things about art, is that sometimes you can take these horrible textures and you can present it in a form that is digestible. And, you know, maybe in the 2D format or however that was, you know, depicting the horrors of war.
Yeah.
In metaphor in a way that's digestible. And then now with maybe that as we evolve, we're able to handle something that's a little more graphic and still appreciate the beauty.
See, for me, I agree with Dylan, but for me, the 3D video crossed that line to the point where it was not digestible. If I were going to see it in 3D, I think I would prefer for it to actually be in a sculpture that takes up a large portion that you can walk through.
Interesting.
I really, in really any media, unless it's like a movie or TV, because then they're supposed to, I absolutely cannot stand when I'm seeing something that's meant to be seen live and it's on a video and the video cuts something off to guide me to where they want me to look. I can't stand it. So that was another reason that I
also too, were the images, was it all created digitally?
I don't know. You know,
because I felt like it wanted some life in terms of something like if all those different views hand painted or hand drawn would be.
It looked like a 3-dimensional sculpture.
Yeah.
And then you're just moving in and out with the camera, but it didn't look big enough to walk through. It looked like the camera just did all the work. But I you know, these are all really great. This is great feedback on that too. I just wanted to see where you felt.
He could take that and 3D print the different elements.
Sure, he could. Yeah, and you can make it.
That would be very cool.
Life size or even larger.
I liked it because it made me want to go back and see the original painting.
Yeah.
Getting inside and sort of taking this almost sort of scuba dive through the painting.
Yeah.
And details in a way that I wanted to go back and see the painting.
I also want to do a study of it, but transform the painting.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that something being still actually gives you the time to process it, whereas when it's moving you through it, you can't necessarily take things in as much.
Yes.
It's also a huge painting.
Yes, it is.
Which in person must give it a tremendous impact. To me, what's interesting is that the only other person that I know of at that time who did the horrors of war, and I don't mean at that time literally, but Goya had done some spectacular, horrible paintings. But otherwise, all anybody painted of war was guys on horses, you know, with the wind blowing in their hair and their manes, looking great.
Yeah.
Their war is pretty horrible.
Well, you can look at Manet. Look at Manet and Delacroix.
I didn't see I haven't seen.
Look at Manet. Manet, because he was in Paris at the time of the Second French Revolution in the 1850s to the 1870s, and he painted some pretty incredible atrocities. Painted and drew. And Delacroix, I'm not too sure about Delacroix, but he did paint some of the more heroic interpretations that I've seen. But look at Manet. He was not afraid to sketch a dead body on the side of the street type of thing.
But I think that your little videos I mean, there's two things. One is, the first one is sort of what you do in your own head when you look at it.
Yes.
That is, you know, you see these, like, you know, a horse's head does go up and rear, and, you know, all these things.
Yeah.
And it's sort of quick. I don't know how helpful they are. It's sort of like somebody saying, "Oh my God, I can even do more of this than Picasso does."
Yeah.
On the other hand, it does kind of draw attention to this and then that. I don't mind it as a teaching thing, and I don't have a very high opinion of it.
Good. Okay. Bravo. All of you, bravo. Way to go.
Can I say what? Is there time for one last thing?
Wait, yeah.
I do think it's a good example of how I've talked about this with my mom. Media in general is getting to the point, I feel, where they're like wanting to push the limits, but they're pushing it to the point where it's not making anything more effective. Like, you can have something gruesome and not actually show it, and people still totally understand and get the feeling, or you can show it and is it actually adding to it? Not all the time. And there's a lot of shows now. I think Nurse Jackie is the one that got us into that conversation on Netflix. If I only saw a little snippet of it, but I was like, that's an example of that.
Okay.
Okay. Let me add just something, Thomas, because I was stationed in Europe in the 50s when they were still rebuilding part of Europe, and then I was down in Africa and got caught down in Africa during the Suez Crisis.
Right.
And it was we were all carrying loaded weapons and stuff, and those images really struck home with me because I've seen some of that, and it's I'm really sort of humbled by it.
Good.
From what I've seen.
All right. Well, because you had direct experience, but you know, it's going to impact people in different ways.
And then I've seen the killing fields in Asia, and
Yes,
Thailand and Cambodia.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. Well, on a lighter note, let's move on. So I went and visited Figueres a few years ago in Spain. Went to Dali's museum, and he had all these eggs surrounding the place, right? And I've got to thinking, you know, when I started teaching this course, why do you have all those eggs on there? So I think he was trying to solve, this is my own opinion, he was trying to solve the difference, you know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And so what I interpreted out of it is what I wrote here, that the egg holds a mystery within, possibilities, ideas are hatched from the egg into a form from which pure potential is made manifest. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, I'm going to show you a few images here of life imitating art. Remember, we did the Fibonacci here, and people are still interested in that 3.1618 perfect rectangle. I just put together a few slides to show that masters study masters. This is Monet and Turner. Okay, this is Whistler being influenced by Grimshaw, which give birth to something else later on. Here's Monet painting in London in the 1870s, 1880s. And this is Childe Hassam, the American Impressionist that went overseas. Same time period, saw this painting, no doubt, came back, saw this. I don't know if this is here or abroad, but it's the same principle. Okay, this is also Childe Hassam and Gustav Caillebotte.
Yeah, I'll do it afterwards, right afterwards.
Hey, Norm, careful.
Excuse me.
It's all right. I feel like I'm in Cheers. Hey, Norm. Pass one over here, Norm. Anyway, you can see how artists, they see them, they see these masterworks of the generation that came before them, or might still be their contemporaries, and then they come over and they paint something like this. And they would reconfigure things, of course. Here's your Whistler and Rothko. Rothko being influenced by Whistler, or Whistler being influenced by Hiroshige. Again, same.
Hiroshika.
Hiroshika?
Ga.
Ga?
Yeah, Hiroshika.
Hiroshige. All right, this Van Gogh being influenced as well. I think this Hiroshige.
Hiroshika.
Okay, showed these Gauguin, Bonnard. Something in the top figure, or the figure in the top of the picture. Okay, and Sorolla and Macaw. He was a court painter, Spanish court painter. A lot of figures on the beach, painted in plein air. Okay, this is my teacher, Dan Macaw. Totally influenced by Sorolla. Okay, here's Dan Macaw here, and a painting he did. Gustav Klimt did. So I love just looking at artwork and trying to figure out who they're borrowing from. Okay, this is Granville Redmond, early California Impressionist painter. He was deaf, and he went to work doing scenic art in Hollywood. He also built the Olive Mill Inn. Actually, Charlie Chaplin built the Olive Mill Inn, but at that same time, Charlie Chaplin hired him on the set to teach him how to become more communicative, what skills he would need to communicate more through silent film, since Redmond was deaf. Okay. All right. Okay. This is Dali, 1931. Okay. M.C. Escher, 1925. So even Dali was influenced. Okay. Dadaism. Okay, this is my influence here. This is Marcel Duchamp, Pablo Picasso, and this is my interpretation here. Okay, this was actually in a, if you go up to Ballard Cemetery and use the restroom at the cemetery, this is what's inside the cemetery there. So anyway, decorative arts in Santa Barbara, at the Santa Barbara School of the Arts, they were teaching this more flat graphic Art Deco design. Okay, a couple of the teachers, actually John Gamble was a teacher at the School of the Arts. I found this painting here done by Pechernikov, who was a Santa Barbara resident at the time. And I don't know who copied who. I'm still trying to figure that out. This is the John Gamble. This is the Pechernikov.
Could they have just gone to the same place and just...
Did they paint at the same time?
I think Pechernikov was here before John Gamble. He arrived. John Gamble arrived after the San Francisco fire. Pechernikov was already here. So, but I mean, it's like, come on, really? Come on. This is a little more simplified.
And just interpreted it differently?
Could they have what? Say that again?
Just gone to the same place and interpreted it differently?
Very possible. This is probably painted right from like where Manning Park is in Montecito, looking up at Montecito Peak. So I don't know. I just don't know, but it's just a little, it's just very too similar. Okay. Modernism creeping in. Okay. This is Arthur Matthews, who was like the head of the School of Art that was going on in Monterey at the time, and Northern California painters. Look at the abstraction and simplification and tonalism that was happening. Now, tonalism means you're just working more with gray tones. Everything's easy to look at. Okay, easy to look at, and you're simplifying all the shapes, tying things together, and having things be more poetic. You can see this is also a result of the arts and crafts period that was also prevalent at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century. Okay, I'm going to go through these really quick. So you had this world here in Santa Barbara, the 1930. you could see what's represented in the very first show at the Faulkner Gallery on October 15th, 1930, all these traditional representational paintings. Okay? Bless you. Oh my goodness. The fun with Zoom. Okay? Look at Ferdinand Lundgren. Okay? He's the guy who started the School of the Arts in 1925. But look at how simple this abstract shape is here. This painting right here is right, I believe, right here on the wall.
Yeah.
Okay, 1933, they had this show at the Faulkner Gallery. So 3 years after it opened, look what came to town. And look at the prices. You could have bought a Jean Murot for $850 on the wall at the Faulkner. George Braque was going for $3,500. That's a lot of money in 1933. Picasso you could have bought for $1,800 on the wall. Or this one for $2,000. Okay? You had a Kandinsky. You had this Max Weber for $800. Stuart Davis. And a Diego Rivera for $50 you could have purchased.
Oh my God.
Okay? Now.
What, and that was in 1933?
Yeah. Yes. So anyways, so you can imagine the effect that this artwork had on the locals, because Santa Barbara, in 1933, there were only 30,000 people in Santa Barbara. And you had a very conservative aesthetic here. All right? So check this out here. This was in the local newspaper. I'm going to read it. Those who were disturbed and mystified and even enraged by the last exhibition at the Faulkner Memorial Gallery, when abstractions by Picasso and Braque and some others were on the walls, will be pleasantly relieved when they see the present show, which reflects the earth and the sea and the things that are therein as they have been used to seeing them.
I just also thought it'd be humorous for inflation. $50 would be $1,000 today. So it's like,
oh my goodness.
Can you imagine? Like, oh my goodness.
So here's the show. Here's Carl Oscar Borg, who's a Western artist, landscape painter, plein air painter, and teacher at the School of the Arts. He says, I try to be liberal and open-minded, but looking at some of those so-called modern work from every standpoint, one is absolutely overwhelmed by the absolute bad taste that prevails, not one redeeming feature.
Boy, that's really encouraging, actually.
Yeah.
No, for artists that see the world differently and make work that is different, to like realize that other people in the past, their work have been told that they're bad and horrible.
Yeah, they had moved into the wrong neighborhood. Okay, so this is Albert Herder. He was a teacher at the School of the Arts too. You might have seen his murals. This mural was in the library. He used to do scenic art and murals for the Lobero Theater. Okay, this is what he had to say. Okay, during the opening of one of his shows at the Voss Gallery, I guess it's in Boston, a reporter from the Boston newspaper asked, "I see no evidence of modernism in your work." I said, "You work, Mr. Herder." An observer said yesterday at the private showing. "No," smiled the artist, "I grew up in a different age, and I shall continue to try to portray objects and not moods, which I feel can best be expressed by music, poetry, or prose. It seems to me that modernism, as expressed by the Cubists, Futurists, and other ists, is on the way out. Some of it is good, but most of it is, well, incomprehensible and the work of fakers." So
oh my God, what a naughty boy.
This is December 8th, which is tomorrow, 1934. Colin Campbell Cooper, who was the dean of landscape painting at the school, this is his quote. In the 1920s, Colin Campbell Cooper shared Borg's distaste for European modernism and defended the Impressionist style, which still dominated California art during the 1920s, and decried the modernist theories such as abstraction by distortion, the simultaneousness of the ambient, and the principle of inner necessity. In general, this so-called modern art is hopelessly depressing and banal. Woo! Boy, I tell you, it really moved some people. And then, of course, John Gamble, all right? He tried to quell, you know, everybody and calm them down. He said, the exaggeration and distortion of modern art is a psychological phase following the World War and will pass. As a revolt against the mere pettiness in art, he thinks it has rendered a service. An artist should be technically skillful and at the same time have something to say. Much of the modern art he finds is a glorification of incompetence and pure caricature. Wow. And then you had these artists. There was a show at the Falcon Gallery from this collection, okay, the Phillips collection, where you could see they had both happening. You had the traditional representational painting going on, and they were trying to bridge it, like this painting by Pierre Bonnard that showed at the Faulkner Gallery. You could see the modernism kind of creeping in on that. Okay. And then in the 1930s, you had Rico Lebrun come to town. And he taught some workshops, okay, to the young artists at the school, like Channing Peake. Okay, this is an example of how Channing Peake turned and went modernist, and Warshaw. And then for those of you who are remembered Jürgen Hansen, who taught at the City College, room 23 for many years. These are examples of his work that nobody has seen. All right, you had the Precisionists. You can see the design, the exactitude and abstraction of the designs here. Hopper, Demuth, and Sheeler. That was happening at the same time. Here is an early Channing Peake, traditional representational painting as he learned in the School of the Arts, and then until he met Rico Lebrun. Here's a Howard Warshaw. Look at the figure in the landscape. And of course, if this is the mural that they were commissioned to paint side by side at the library, 1955.
I remember when I was a little girl at the library. I can't tell you how many hours I spent in front of that painting.
Yeah.
I just loved that painting.
I do have pictures of Warshaw painting his, and I do have a picture of Michael Peake wearing the suit of armor and posing for that, as well as the smaller gridded out preliminary sketch. And if you go up to Westmont College and go into the art museum there, inside the head curator's office, they have the preliminary mural of this, which is about maybe 4 feet by 8 feet inside. Okay.
I want to do something that big.
All right, moving on. Got realism. You can see it's almost like they're pushing each other in opposite directions in design. Okay, you've got the abstractions, the abstract expressionists, the surrealists, opposing the traditional representational painters and moving them more toward realism. But you can still see, this is Millard Sheets from 1930, and he's a traditional representational painter, but you can see how this whole influence of modern art started to creep in. And look at his latter paintings. Look at the stylization and simplification and graphic quality of his artwork. Okay, 1940s. You had World War II sets in. I don't know how many of you know this, but many artists were hired to become part of a unit in World War II called the Ghost Soldiers. The artists went from New York all over the United States. This was their patch, and their job was to create decoys and things that looked real to the enemy. One of them was Arthur Singer. After the war, he came back and took up a traditional representational painting again and did this whole series of stamps. Okay, Bill Blass comes back to New York and creates clothing design. Okay, and Ellsworth Kelly was one of those ghost soldiers or ghost artists. The thing is, they were not allowed to talk about it for 70 years. They had signed a contract, so nobody knew what they did in the war until a few years ago when they they came out and they made a movie and a book about their unit. And okay, so then you move on to an extreme in both directions here, going into abstract expressionism and minimalism. Okay. Okay. Now, MC Escher again, the design, looking to see where the heck they found their design patterns from. You can all see this one on the left. We kind of went through it in the earlier part of the class. I saw this in one of his sketchbooks. And I found this on the internet. This is a Moorish design inlay. So you can see how he studied art. And look at how he comes up with these patterns and things that evolve from one thing into the next. This is an example of showing art evolving and becoming something. What you saw Picasso do, right? Starting off with a still life into a fish and then into something that was almost unrecognizable. Okay? All right. Art imitates life. Okay, early 19th century tugboat going under the bridge. Okay, here's a Millard Sheets tugboat going under the bridge. Oh, here's a Thomas Kincaid. Look at that, tugboat under the bridge. And you're going to see a film in just a minute here on this, tugboat under the bridge. The producer of the film knew about this. Ivan Earle lived in, he was an American artist, lived in Santa Ynez. Okay, look at the serograph here. This is, yeah, look at this early 19th or early 20th century. Actually, this is more Art Nouveau. This is late 19th century Art Nouveau print. I'm not saying he copied this, but you can definitely see he was holding on to that stylization, right? Bev Doolittle, hide and seek art. Remember we did camouflage art? How artists moved in the direction of trying to hide things. So she was kind of a gimmick artist in the 1990s. I don't even know if she's still alive. This is a little more obvious. You see the horse here, but when you look at this painting, you look in the mirror and you see a cowboy here, but then look over here on the left, you see the Indian?
Yeah.
All right, little camouflage art. Art influenced life. I don't know how many people saw the movie 1917 last year before the pandemic hit. It's a John Singer Sargent painting. But when I saw this in the movie, I thought of this painting. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to end this and we're going to watch something here. We're going to go there and we're going to go back to here and we're going to skip these two. I'm going to move right on into this here. We don't have much time left.
You're in a museum. In one room, you admire an exquisitely rendered painting of a lush garden by Spanish artist Santiago Rusiñol. In another, you encounter one of the most famous paintings in the world, a monumental work by Picasso that bowls you over with its dynamic composition of abstracted but still recognizable figures and forms, telling you of the horrors of the 1937 bombing of the village of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War. And in another room, you come across something completely different. A picture of a chair, and a blown-up dictionary definition of a chair by Toledo, Ohio-born artist Joseph Kosuth. What the actual... Can we really call this art? This thing that is entirely unlike those other things in the rooms before it, that exhibits no technical skill and transports you to nowhere but right where you are, in an empty feeling, slightly chilly gallery? How can this be art? And what am I supposed to do with it? This is the case for conceptual art. Kosuth made this work in New York in 1965. In the years leading up, the Equal Pay Act had been passed, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, the Civil Rights Act was freshly signed into law, and the Vietnam War and protests against it were in full effect. The decade's identity as one of countercultural revolution was crystallizing, and the art of the time likewise reflected a widespread questioning of tradition. There was pop art, and minimalism, and happenings, and fluxus, Paintings, when they did happen, were coming off of the wall and invading your space. And there was also this thing that Kossuth was doing, which came to be called conceptual art. In 1967, artist Sol LeWitt explained it like this. In conceptual art, the idea or concept is the most important aspect of the work. It means that all the planning and decisions are made beforehand, and the execution is a perfunctory affair. The idea becomes the machine that makes the art. For LeWitt, this often meant creating specific instructions and diagrams for large-scale wall drawings that could be carried out by others. Even after LeWitt's death, a draftsperson, or many of them, can make the drawing happen, as long as the instructions and certificate of authenticity are on hand. The resulting works can be magnificent, but it's not the individual touch of the artist that makes them so. It's the idea, supported by proper execution. Sometimes people were the machines that made the art. Like for a 1969 piece, Vito Acconci challenged himself to follow randomly selected passers-by until they entered a private space. He said of it, "I'm almost not an I anymore. I put myself in the service of this scheme." And sometimes it was actually machines that were the machines that made the art. Ian Byrne's Xerox book came to be when he photocopied a blank sheet of white paper, and then copied that copy, and so on and so forth 100 times, with more and more visual noise appearing as he went. Documentation is often how we come to know about conceptual art. And that's okay, because the physical presence is secondary to the idea that brought it into being. You didn't have to be there to see Eleanor Antin parade 50 pairs of rubber boots on a trip around California and New York. She took photos and made postcards of them and mailed them to hundreds of artists and museums and libraries and friends. And when you see one of those postcards or hear about them in a YouTube video, your understanding isn't really distorted or diminished. Art critic and curator Lucy Lepard described what was happening at the time as a dematerialization. It wasn't often as literal as John Baldessari's cremation piece of 1969, in which he burned all of his paintings and had the ashes interred in a wall of the Jewish Museum, because materials were almost always involved. It's just that they were often ephemeral: maps, diagrams, photos, books, or at least not the primary concern. Even molten lead became fleeting, as much as it can be, in the hands of Richard Serra, who in the late 60s focused on action and process over finished object. None of his original splash or cast pieces still exist. They were made for temporary shows and discarded after. Uniqueness wasn't important. He has since made new iterations following the same procedure. More characteristic of conceptual art is Douglas Hubler's Duration Piece No. 6, for which he made a rectangle of sawdust in a doorway and documented it every half hour for 6 hours. The sawdust was then cleared away, and what you see here is the final piece. Hubler said at the time, "The world is full of objects, more or less interesting. I do not wish to add any more. I prefer simply to state the existence of things in terms of time and or place." Which brings us back to those chairs, because what Kossuth is doing is pointing out the existence of things in time and place, taking it a few steps further than when Magritte reminded us that this painting of a pipe is not a pipe. Like when we look at this painting of a chair, we know it's not a real chair, but we're probably not thinking about how it's a kind of sign we recognize as indicating a chair. Just as a dictionary definition is a verbal sign that points to something in the world, and a photograph is a visual sign that points to something that is or used to be in the world. Which of these three chairs do we perceive to be more chair than the other? Especially now that this real one is in a museum collection and will likely never be sat in again. If this putting regular stuff in a museum sounds familiar, it's because Duchamp, who made conceptual art way before it was cool or even had a name. In 1913, Marcel Duchamp attached a bicycle wheel to a wooden stool and called it a ready-made work of art. It was art because he said it was, and because he put it in a gallery. Kossuth's operation here is similar. He said the art consists of my action of placing this activity in an art context. But the art context didn't have to be a gallery. Sure, there were exhibitions that chronicled this kind of art, but more often the art was its own means of distribution. Seth Siegelov thought of his Xerox book as an exhibition venue in itself, giving each artist included 25 pages to make a work that responded in some way to the format. Anquara made art by documenting his everyday life,
and mailing news of it on postcards to friends, acquaintances, and art collectors. Eleanor Antin photographed herself naked every morning to document her weight loss of 10 pounds over the course of 37 days. And Mary Kelly recorded the activity of taking care of her young son, reflected on motherhood and conversations with him, and eventually allowed him to scribble over her documentation. As Lepard wrote in 1973, much art now is transported by the artist, or in the artist himself. Conceptual art was a way of working around the power structures of the art world, which as it happens was rife with himself, and around market concerns. Lee Lozano began her general strike piece in 1969, declaring her withdrawal from the art world and documenting her final visits to gallery openings and museums. Conceptual art was out in the world, often blending with activism. The Art Workers Coalition organized in 1969 to agitate for artists' rights and against Vietnam, racism, and sexism. But for the most part, conceptual art was political not in its illustration of current events, but in its commitment to rethink the status quo. There was a worker mentality and pragmatism to much first-generation conceptual art, a deadpan recording and structuring of life, almost aggressively unartful, that replaced the careful consideration of composition and form and flourish normally associated with art and artists. Ed Ruscha's book 26 Gasoline Stations recorded exactly that, 26 gasoline stations. Berndt and Hilla Becker took straightforward pictures of water towers. That's what they did, across years and continents. There was no trickery at play, no need for an interpreter. What's needed for this kind of art, more than interpretation, is a shift in perspective, an opening of a door that allows an idea by Douglas Hubler to be art, a piece of paper that reads, "The line above is rotating on its axis at a speed of 1 revolution each day," or a sign to be art, like this one by Louise Kamnitzer. You can sit with this for a few seconds. In 1969, artist and writer Victor Bergen contended it may now be said that an object becomes or fails to become a work of art in direct response to the inclination of the perceiver to assume an appreciative role. As Morse Peckham has put it, art is not a category of perceptual fields, but of role-playing. So it's up to you. Do you want to play your role and call this art? If you do, congratulations. In some cases, you might now own it. Lawrence Weiner's 2 minutes of spray paint directly upon the floor from a standard aerosol spray can is exactly what it sounds like. And according to the artist the year after it was made, they don't have to buy it to have it. They can have it just by knowing it. We're used to art galleries being places where visual experience reigns supreme. But conceptual art asks us to understand the gallery experience as never having been purely visual, always informed by our other senses, the art's context, and the invisible perceptual operations happening in our minds to process it. Conceptual art has given us new words to describe what we encounter and new levels of interaction. We can still appreciate a masterful painting, but in a world after conceptual art, we do so with our blinders off, understanding that art is composed of signs. It illustrates, it lives in specific buildings, it decorates rich people's homes. Once conceptual art's lessons have been internalized, we see that this is not a garden. This is not what happened at Guernica. Conceptual art still lives and blends with many other ways of making, but it's a slippery art, one that avoids living in just one spot, one that resists ownership and being turned into just another luxury good. Despite its utopian aims, conceptual art was and is still gobbled up by institutions and put on the auction block. But when it's good, it lives far outside of our art stores and places of art worship. And in this way, these ephemeral works are strangely more permanent for their never having much physicality to begin with. Marble crumbles, paintings fade, but ideas can last forever. Hey guys, PBS Digital Studios is conducting it.
All right, do you see where we're going with this? What are you going to do in your world? What are you going to choose?
Not make any more boring art.
Good.
I'm going to get out of the way and let it decide.
Yes, yes. Let it have a voice.
Yeah. Oh, I love that piece.
Yeah, this is Larry Vigon from last week.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 images I'm going to show you of his because he's an example of a graphic designer who and fine artist that, you know, he knows how to simplify things and make something out of nothing. This is an older piece of his as well. This is an example of that same type of artwork. Remember the design work that we did where one line comes into another line, and you just kind of like fill in the blanks type of thing. But what he would do is he would take images from other paintings that he had done and collage them in. Okay, now I want you to, now that you've seen that, I want you to watch this. This is going to throw you a little bit more. Just a little. Get you thinking outside the box. Anytime. Skip ad.
I started analyzing paintings as a way to confront the problem of not engaging with certain forms and genres of art. I mean, you stand at a museum, look at a Kandinsky or a Monet or Seurat, and wonder, what exactly am I supposed to feel here? Certain paintings seem particularly stubborn, unwilling to move even an inch in your direction, leaving you with a massive void to fill with unanchored interpretation. But what about paintings that do the opposite? René Magritte's The Treachery of Images moves more than an inch in the direction of the viewer. It goes all the way. The painting speaks in a language that we can understand, which is to say, language itself. Ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is not a pipe. The painting actually says something. It engages. It talks. So what's it trying to say? First, let's talk for a moment about René Magritte, one of the most famous and lasting of the Surrealist artists. A man who never really thought of himself as a painter, more a thinker that used images to express himself. Once he landed on an aesthetic style that never really changed or evolved throughout his career. Well-versed in philosophical writing from Plato to Foucault, he used that style to investigate ideas. His program was to confuse, to evoke mystery, to show us that what we want is always behind the thing we see, and that the obstruction can never be removed completely because it's not in the object, it's in vision and thought itself. The Treachery of Images approaches these themes directly. The painting at first is obvious in its message. It shows an image of a pipe, and then underneath the image, it tells or reminds the viewer that this is not a pipe, and we can infer the rest. Obviously, that's not a pipe, it's a representation of a pipe, and Magritte means to show us that representations are not the real thing, they only resemble the real thing. But of course, that's common sense. Who in the world would argue the opposite position? But a curious question comes out of this. If someone showed you this image and asked you what it was, what would you say? Probably you'd say, it's an apple, right? Or what about this image? It's a man. Or this is a train. This is a house. This is a dog. This is a hand. This is a pipe. This little accident of language is not really an accident at all. For many hundreds of years, human beings have supposed that language and reality had an organic relationship, that the names of things, in a way, arose out of the things themselves, that a tree was, in fact, a tree, that Kanye West is, in fact, Kanye West, and that a pipe is really a pipe. All of that was challenged by the famous linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, an extremely influential figure who saw that a thing and its name have a totally arbitrary relationship, that we don't really know things, but only access their shadow through language, in which everything has a meaning in the context of the system. After so many centuries of trusting the word implicitly, these insights were hard-won. So hard-won that Magritte saw that the old, wrong-headed ways of thinking about language were still hiding in the way we thought and talked about images. Realistic painting plays on resemblance, and resemblance suggests a hierarchy, that the image of a pipe resembles, that it points outside language to the thing in itself. The falseness of this claim is what inspired the abstract artists to move beyond resemblance into a field in which painting had no referent in reality as such. Magritte, on the other hand, makes this point using the false premises of resemblance and shatters them from within. The visual secret dependence on language is laid bare in the treachery of images. Indeed, that dependence is the treachery of images. Here we have an image and a sentence laid out like a page from a botanical textbook, begging to be connected. But why should we connect them? Why should the sentence and the image refer to one another? How do we know that the word this points upward? Of course, we don't know. But the pronoun, the resemblance, and the name all make that connection inevitable. And it's that inevitability that's made real in every aspect of our lives. We go about our days confident that everything we see could be said and that the images we say could be seen. But if you've ever used the phrase, "you had to be there," you know that these are two realities that do not overlap in the way we act like they do. This is not a pipe, yes. But this is not a pipe either. And if this is not a pipe, then the sentence scrawled in its cute schoolboy cursive is actually a contradiction that pulls the whole painting apart at the seams and makes it utter nonsense. I don't know if Magritte laughed about that, but I hope he did. Because what's more forceful, not moving an inch in the direction of the viewer, or moving a question all the way into the center of the viewer's mind, that on the slightest prodding and examination implodes.
Was that cerebral enough for you?
That was great.
Good.
Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome. Yeah, hold on just one sec. All right, we did the conceptual, la, la, la. Okay. Moving forward, artists killing sacred cows. I don't know if you noticed this when I showed you this. When I saw it, I thought, oh, this is interesting. You know, it's an old symbol, right?
I noticed it.
Yeah. And then this is Andre Serrano's Piss Christ, where he stuck a crucifix into a jar of urine. Okay. You've got Banksy. Okay. Banksy creating things, pushing buttons, bringing social commentary into our lives. You study Banksy, nobody really knows who he is. He's a mystery man, but he does strike, and when he strikes, he makes quite the statement.
Someone must know who he is.
Someone must know. That's right. His bookkeeper. This is a painting I did here 2 years ago. A large 6 by 12 foot mural in a guy's house. But I have God handing Adam an iPad. So it was going to say the man was a Marine, and he wanted me to put a Marine Corps logo on his forearm or on his shoulder and have this say Semper Fi. But too many people were going to be coming to see the mural from the Mount Carmel Church. So he had me change the message to that. Again, changing art and making it more contemporary by giving a symbol from today. It's almost like an anachronism. Or now walking around, this is in Bisbee. I was walking in Bisbee recently, a couple years ago, in a snowstorm, after a snowstorm, and I saw this, and I recalled this painting by John Singer Sargent. Okay, or I was in Iceland and at the airport, and they've got all these circles, you know, these windows going through the airport. So I hopped in there, and my buddy took a picture of me. So, you know, art imitates life. I showed you that one from the very beginning. Okay, this is one of the latest ones here. My friend's coffee latte at, what's it called? Dune Coffee. All right, I turned it upside down, and it looked like someone's rear end sticking out of the coffee. So, all right. It's just a way of looking at things and perception, okay? And then Larry Vigon, on one of his album covers, Thomas Dolby's album cover, he had a pipe, and he said, instead of "this is not a pipe," he said, "close, but no cigar. Right? So, no, I just love it because it took it to another level. And I just threw this in here for fun. This is a Douglas Partial rendering of a horse for a mural. Okay, and then on the right-hand side, as artists, you deal with this in your design work. You go from ultimate realism to when your client runs out of money. Oh.
So which is the cheaper? The one that is the child that took a lifetime, or the back end of the horse that's done in 3 years?
If this was a Picasso.
Yeah.
No.
All perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to end that. All right, I'm going to end that, and I'm going to go back to this, and we're moving on. Okay. So again, art influencing life and learning from history or not. By the way, and one thing we did not cover in this class, there are so many forms of art. Stand by here. So many forms of art out there that we could have gotten into, but we didn't. But out of honor for the 79th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I thought about cartography and the drawing of maps. And so I did a little quick research before the class on this map that was found on in an airplane, in a Japanese Zero that had crashed or been shot down on Pearl Harbor 79 years ago today. And it was a map done of where the locations of all the ships were in Pearl Harbor. And as a result of maps that they had in spy networks, I found this image here, which is interesting. They had recreated from those maps this design, three-dimensional design of Pearl Harbor, that they were able to place all the ships accurately. So when all the pilots who were going to be flying on that mission could come and, get a clearer idea where they were going to go when they went on their mission. And of course, if you look at that last image that I just showed you here, you can see how similar the lineup is as a result of that cartography. How the ships are lined up here, how they're lined up there. This is taken from one of the Japanese planes during the bombing.
Wow.
And last but not least, there's an example there that was during the bombing as well. One of the ships getting torpedoed there. And then an after action report of cartography on the part of a Japanese pilot. He drew for his commanding officers what he saw and how the ships were struck, etc. So cartography is a fine art in itself. The more accurate you are with your map, the better chances you are of finding the direction you aim to go in. I do know that cartography, when Wellington fought against Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, the map that the French prided themselves on cartography, the map had left out a road, a sunken road. And when Napoleon, at the end of the battle, charged Wellington with his heavy cavalry, they went right into the road, and it broke the momentum of the charge. And from that point on, that turned the tide of the battle. So cartography is muy importante. And again, on this 79th anniversary of the Battle of Pearl Harbor, or the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I put that in. I showed this picture here. It's always been intriguing. Remember the camouflage art that was brought in World War I, how it came back into existence in World War II. They're all pretty much the same patterns that they used. And remember, they weren't designed to hide the ships, but to make them optically more difficult to hit for the submarines that were in the neighborhood. Okay, so here's another example of life being influenced by art.
There's an interesting set of shapes and patterns that emerge when an object is dragged through a body of water or when water flows past a stationary object. And since every boat has a wake, there's an interesting geometry to the way that the fluid moves behind it and under it and alongside of it. And I wanted to dig into that in some way.
Flow Separation is an exhibition by the artist Tava Albad, commissioned by Public Art Fund and 1480 Now. Flow Separation is a contemporary take on dazzle camouflage applied to the John J. Harvey fireboat. Throughout the summer months, we're taking it to different piers in the city. It'll be offering free rides.
We're having a little issue with the winds are affecting the